Okay, haven't done a Ukraine explainer video in a while, in part because I've been watching, trying to see what was going to happen. As I said, I think in the last video, as this war switched to a big kind of World War II style war in eastern Ukraine, it was going to take some time to see how that was going to go. It's still early days, but we're beginning to see some things. So I'm going to talk about how things are going and then about the possibility of escalation. One reason to talk about escalation is because nobody has achieved an early breakthrough in this war along a long, roughly a 300-mile or 500-kilometer line of contact in Eastern Europe, Eastern Ukraine. So it's beginning to look like, and again, we don't want to speak too soon, but it's beginning to look like this could sort of bog down into stalemate. And one of the things one thinks about doing when that is happening is to escalate, is to find a way to change the war, to make things more difficult on your opponent, or to raise the stakes and try to find out, do they have the will and the capability to stick with you? One aspect of escalation, sort of a horizontal escalation we've heard about a little bit in recent weeks, is the idea that Russia might try to extend this war to Moldova. Now, I should probably do a whole Moldova explainer on Moldova. It's a small country that was part of the Soviet Union, to the southwest of Ukraine. And before World War II, it was part of Romania. And Russian forces, pro-Russian separatists supported by the Russian army, kept a slice of it all the way back, going all the way back to 1992. Right? So it's one aspect of conflict in this region that's really been going on for a long time. And the idea is, this is on the southwestern border of Ukraine, the idea is maybe Russia would attack from there. I don't, first of all, we shouldn't take this too seriously. It got in the news because one Russian general said something about it. Now, that's not really necessarily a good guide to what the Russians are going to do. More to the point, though, Russia only has a couple of thousand troops in Moldova. It's not enough really to have too big of an impact on anything. And of course, at this point, if they were to try to put more soldiers in there, besides the problems of getting them there would be the question of you'd be taking them away from the front line of where the battle really is in eastern Ukraine. So I don't think that's too likely to happen, which probably means that it'll happen tomorrow. The more interesting question, the bigger question, I think, is escalation within Ukraine itself. And we've seen a couple of dimensions of this already. The United States, over the last week or 10 days, has really escalated its rhetoric. President Biden talking about really trying to weaken Russia. There's been more, I would say, forthright conversation coming out of the Pentagon about the United States helping Ukraine locate targets, including Russian generals, and potentially there's some uncertainty about exactly what help the United States might have given Ukraine in locating and sinking this, or identifying at least the location of this cruiser that was sunk, the Moskva. So it's very explicitly the United States saying they're helping the Ukrainians target Russians. That can't make the Russians very happy. And it actually, I think, is probably a not very wise thing to be talking about, because it just feeds the Russian narrative that this is really the Americans they're fighting, not the Ukrainians. The other thing that's more interesting, I think, in terms of United States rhetoric is the United States using language now like helping Ukraine win this war, right? Not really talking just about helping Ukraine defend against Russia, but talking about victory. The implication being that the United States is going to support Ukraine, not only holding the territory it has, but taking territory back. And there's an important sense in which I like that, right? I'd like to see Ukraine get this territory back. That would certainly be fair. But it is a change in the stated objectives of the United States. So in that sense, escalating the goals is something that's worth noting. Finally, it's worth pointing out, and I should say that Ukraine is kind of changing its rhetoric in the same way. And this makes sense, right? When things go better on the battlefield, you perhaps hope for more. When things go worse on the battlefield, you maybe think about accepting less. The other thing that's interesting in terms of escalation is lots of countries in the West, including but not only the United States, are talking more and more about supplying heavy weapons to Ukraine, in particular artillery systems of the sort that are going to be necessary for a long-haul war along this long front in eastern Ukraine. And one of the big questions people have now in terms of sustaining this conflict or winning the conflict is, can both sides continue to sustain the supplies of these weapons and the ammunition for them at the rate that they're currently using them? There's the old saying again, and I'll say it again, is amateurs talk about tactics, experts talk about logistics. So this is in the long run part of the context now. Let's talk a little bit about potential escalation by Russia. People still ask me about nuclear escalation. I think it's still extremely, extremely unlikely. Can't rule anything out, but it would be a bad idea for Russia. Whatever it is they think they might lose in Ukraine now is nothing to what they can lose if they start a nuclear war. The more interesting question that a lot of people have been raising, and that I've been curious about from the very beginning, as soon as the United States started supplying Ukraine, and I should say not just the United States, Poland has done an immense amount, Slovakia has done an immense amount. Lots of countries, all those weapons are coming into Western Ukraine and being transported through Ukraine to the front in the east. Why has Russia not done more to attack those supply lines? They did attack a rail depot near Lviv last week, knocked out the power supply from what we can tell. But fairly quickly, those trains were up and running again. And this is actually a long story in warfare, going all the way back to the Civil War, which was really one of the first wars in which railroads were important, which is knocking out rail lines was a big, important mission. But people are incredibly resilient at getting rail lines up and running again as soon as they get knocked out. And so the point I'm getting at is for Russia really to stop those supply lines, you can't just bomb once and consider it done. They have to bomb, whether it's roads, rail lines, bridges, bomb them and keep bombing them. And you sort of get in this back and forth of fixing things and blowing them up and fixing them and blowing them up. It's not really happened, and it's not clear why. Part of it might be because it would take Russian aircraft to do some of this work, and they're worried about getting their aircraft shot down. Part of it might be, and we really don't know, but part of it might be that Russia has a limited supply of the rockets that they would be using to do this if they weren't going to use airplanes. So in any event, we don't really know, but it's kind of a mystery. It seems like a lost opportunity for Russia. The other thing people have been talking a lot about this week in particular, looking to next week, is the possibility that Russia might escalate in the number of soldiers. One of the problems we have right now, one of the problems Russia has right now is that basically all the forces it has able to put in this war are in this war. It went to war with a peacetime army, roughly 250,000 deployable forces, and that's what they've gone with. And that's what they're fighting with. But of course, those units are now being depleted, and they're trying to fight along this very long front in eastern Ukraine. And to try to get enough forces in any local place to overwhelm the Ukrainian forces is difficult. So the speculation is that Russia, in order to bring more troops to bear on the problem, is going to go for a so-called general mobilization, basically saying we're at war, and we're now going to start a draft or conscripting people. That strikes most people as very politically risky. Putin was adamant from the beginning of the war that conscripts would not be fighting in this war. And so, for the average Russian so far, in some important respects, this war may not have come home as much as it will come home if their friends, their kids, their grandkids, their spouses start getting sent off to fight. So this is really a big question, and it's a big question because Monday, May 9th, is Victory Day. It's the anniversary of the Soviet victory over Germany in World War II. And Putin, this was always a big deal under the Soviets, but Putin has really almost turned this into sort of the state religion of post-Soviet Russia and has used imagery from World War II throughout this conflict to basically say what Russia is doing now is the same thing it was doing. That's a large part of the reason there's been talk about Nazis in Ukraine, is Putin knows that this has very particular echoes for the Russian people. So the argument is that, or the sort of speculation is that if he's going to go for a general mobilization, which typically wouldn't be popular, the way to sell it is through this argument that we're fighting World War II over again. And the time to do that, of course, would be on May 9th. Now, if we go back to the beginning of the war, there was a very different notion about what he would do on May 9th. The idea was he was planning on having a victory to declare by May 9th. And the idea was actually he was going to hold a victory parade not only on Red Square in Moscow, but on the main street, the Khreshchatyk in Kiev. it looks like now maybe the best thing he's going to be able to do is maybe hold some kind of parade in Mariupol, a Black Sea port in southern Ukraine. That's where the Ukrainians have been holding out incredibly heroically, but are slowly being wiped out there. So May 9th then gives the opportunity for Putin to go in two very different directions. One is to up the ante dramatically, to escalate by saying, I'm going to call a general mobilization. We're going to start conscripting large number of people in the Russian army so that we can try to bring enough forces to this fight in eastern Ukraine to overwhelm the Ukrainians there. The flip side is this could be the opportunity he takes to say, we're declaring victory and going home. Now, I don't know if he'll do anything quite that stark, but the point is this might be the opportunity for him to try to declare that he has achieved Russia's objectives there, which would give him the ability, probably not to retreat. I don't think he would do that, but maybe at least to accept not trying too hard to gain any more important victories, and then try to freeze the conflict along the current lines of control. So he could do either of those things, or he may do something much more ambiguous. Putin is often very good at playing his cards close to the vest when he's not saying very bombastic things. So we'll just have to see. But so this is the teaser to sort of say, watch what he says next Monday, May 9th, and in particular, if something notable comes out of that, I'll do another Ukraine Explainer next Monday or Tuesday, and try to sort out what's going on.